Alright, my name's Matthew Cook. This is Mr. Campbell, Mrs. Campbell, my mother, father, and my brother. They're going to be watching my speech. Let me get the camera working. Is that good? Everything good? Alright. Which would you say is the more brutal death? To be killed instantly by a speeding bullet, or to be torn limb for limb until life is no longer possible? Obviously, the second way is the more brutal death. Abortion kills millions of unborn children by brutally dismembering them until they die. When those who are weak and helpless are being exterminated every day, then it's up to us to stand up for them. They can't stand for themselves, so we have to take a stand for them. They cannot cry out in pain, so we must be their voice and cry out for them. After volunteering for a day at the local pregnancy center, I was able to see how individuals can work together not only to stop abortion, but also to provide healthy alternatives to expectant mothers. It is our responsibility to stand up for the lives of the unborn. And I'd like to show you that by explaining the very procedures used to perform an abortion, just to show you how evil it really is. Then show you from a Christian perspective why we must take a stand against it. And finally, show some practical actions that we could use in our stand against abortion. First, I'd like to share with you a little bit about what abortion really is. The varying procedures used to abort a baby are brutal and devastating. First, I'll start out with aspiration abortion. And I got most of my information from Planned Parenthood's website, because they're the ones that provide abortion. So they provide details about how it's performed. First, it says, and I quote, "A tube is inserted through the cervix into the uterus, and then either a handheld suction device or a suction machine gently empties the uterus." Now, this may be gentle for the mom. However, according to an article on abort73.com, it's far from gentle for the infant. The aspirator provides the necessary suction to empty the uterus, pulling the developing human being to pieces in the process. Next, I'd like to tell you a little bit about dilation and evacuation abortion, which is even more brutal, if you can imagine that. It's the type of abortion that brutally rips a fetus apart. In this abortion technique, a tool that is basically a pair of forceps with serrated ends is inserted and is used to saw off the appendages of the infant and remove them from the mother. Finally, the head is removed and crushed as it's taken out of the womb. And then Planned Parenthood explains it very vaguely, saying medical instruments and a suction device are used to gently empty the mother's uterus. Obviously, they're very vague and don't share the entire truth about this. Now that you know a little bit about the horrors of abortion, let me explain to you from a Christian perspective why we must stand up against it. First, God makes it clear that the unborn are still people. He says in Psalm 139, "For you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made." Obviously, God puts great detail and work into fashioning us while we're still in the womb. Then, Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I consecrated you to be a prophet to the nations." Now, Dr. D. James Kennedy, in reference to this passage, said, "We don't consecrate a tumor. or appendix, but a person. So obviously, God considers the unborn to be people worth consecrating. He also explains that murder is wrong. Now, killing a person is murder. We've already established that an unborn person is a person. Now, God said in Exodus 20:13, "You shall not murder." So we as Christians, from a biblical perspective, must stand up against the violence against unborn children. Obviously, we must take a stand against abortion. But how? I'd like to explain to you a few ways that we can practically stand against it. First, we can demand legislation for the civil rights of the unborn. Now, there have been many civil rights activists throughout history, including William Wilberforce and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They both stood against slavery and discrimination against black people. And when they did this, their voices were heard, and they were able to make a change. We can do the same thing for the unborn. Also, we must inform others about the dangerous consequences of abortion. And we must urge them to consider alternatives, such as parenting and adoption. Lastly, we must forgive those who have had abortions and show them the love of God so that they can see and come to know God's redemption. Now I would like to wrap up my presentation. Obviously, abortion is a terrible thing in our society. It kills millions of children through horrible practices that I've explained to you. And as Christians, we need to stand up. But how? How will you defend the unborn? I encourage all of you to call your local senators and demand legislation that defends the unborn. If we all work together, we can make decisive action that will effectively end abortion. Thank you.